Coming up on Downloaded, Kim.com starts up a new file sharing site. Can the DOJ stop him? Sony sells off its prime office space in New York. Find out why it's called the Chippendale Building and whether Sony is headed towards the poorhouse. Will Apple's latest earnings report make or break the company? And breeding Neanderthals in the 21st century. Is this a triumph of science or just an incredibly foolish experiment? All that and more on this episode of Downloaded. Hey, welcome to Downloaded, and this is the show where we gather the most opinionated voices in the tech field today and focus that energy on the stories that are impacting the tech world and maybe even the world at large. I am your host, Jim Louderback. Joining me today, happy to have Seth Rosenblatt, senior editor at CNET, and of course, Patrick Norton. Y'all know him, the host of Revision 3's Techzilla. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you here. We are going to jump right into it. There are a lot of stories today. First one, everybody's favorite guy, Dotcom, starting a new file sharing service. Okay, it's called Mega. First of all, I can't take a guy named Dotcom seriously, Patrick. What's the deal with that?
Well, the federal government, I mean, the United States government takes him pretty seriously. He's a thief, he's a scoundrel, he's a rogue, he's evil, he's a sack of, I mean...
Large sack.
Yeah, large sack. Look, you know, but I love the fact that he's basically, I'm okay, I was being mean, but a respectful mean, because he basically turned around and said, okay, Department of Justice, you want to make my life a misery? You want to seize my assets? You want to destroy my business? You want to screw over tens of thousands of users who trusted my system to store their files? I'm going to start an entirely new file storage system, and I'm going to create plausible deniability by making sure I can't know what anything on the system is.
Okay. All right, let's take a step back. Seth, help us understand. Sure. What was Mega Upload? What happened to it, and how is Mega different?
Well, Mega Upload was hosted, I believe, on servers around the world. This is hosted entirely in New Zealand, so the New Zealand government has to go after Kim.com before anything can happen, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen because he's, you know, the best piece of publicity since Peter Jackson for them. Right.
Well, so yeah, what's the Hobbit connection here? I was going to ask, are we powered by Gandalf or what?
We might very well be. You know, one of the really interesting things about Mega, though, is that one of the big things is, as you said, is that it's encrypted, and you know, Kim.com supposedly has no way to get at any of the information on there, which is great. But apparently, there's actually some encryption issues with mega.co.nz. So he is using encryption. Some people are saying that he's not using the highest level of encryption possible, and so this site is actually hackable.
It's encryption, but not very good encryption.
It could be better.
Could be better. So the thing that I like about this is you get 50 gigabytes of free storage if you sign up. How is this different, Patrick, from Dropbox, from Box.net, from all the other cloud, from iGoogle or whatever the cloud stuff they have?
They'll give you like 2 or 5 gigabytes of storage for free. They're all hosted in the United States. They make no claims of not being able to tell what's stored on your system because they all have administrators that have full access to the basically anything that's stored there. Like if you want to keep things secret on Dropbox or Box.net, encrypt them before you upload them. Right. I mean, you know, it's.
And if the U.S. government subpoenas these sites, you know, at some point, one of these sites is just going to roll over and hand over the data.
Right.
You know? So in fact, what we have then with mega.co.nz is the ability for you to put things up that hopefully nobody can get access to, is what you're saying, right?
Within the bounds of the protections of the laws of New Zealand.
So the guys who went up on Mega and Mega Upload and put all their stuff up on Mega Upload, they basically, it's all gone now, right? I mean, it's sitting in some limbo somewhere and they don't have access to it. Are you worried at all, Seth or Patrick, if you start using the service that at some point they may all go away as well and you may be up the creek without a hobbit?
Or without a file. I mean, yeah, it's possible. I mean, one of the scary things about these cloud services is that at any point, any of them could roll over. It may kill their business model, it may not. We've seen with Facebook, for example, that privacy issues, as long as you slowly roll over them and destroy them one piece at a time, people tend not to notice. It's like, you know,
boiling a lobster.
It's like boiling a lobster. And I was thinking frog, but you know.
Same basic concept.
It is the same concept, and it's really scary that at any point, one of these things could happen and your data could be catastrophically exposed.
So have either of you actually used the service?
I think we've both registered, but neither one of us has gotten confirmation yet.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in more of the story, I don't know if we can take the output of my computer, but Kim.com's site, which is Kim.com.
Strange.
The truth will come out, the privacy company, He's Mr. President. I mean, this is not the sight of somebody who's rational from my perspective.
Oh, he's extremely rational.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually quite clever. This is a great appeal to people who would be concerned about hosting their files in the cloud in the U.S. on a U.S.-based server. So if this kind of appeal to that kind of person, this is great.
Yeah, if the idea of the United States government kicking the doors in at your country and coercing the local police into arresting you on what may or may not be questionable grounds offends you, come use my file service and come help make me rich again for the third or fourth time in my life.
All right, well, we'll hear a lot more about this, I'm sure. Mega, the privacy company, as I have on my screen. Bigger, better, faster, stronger, safer. Just to close out on this story, Patrick, do you believe it?
Sure, why not? Until, I mean, look, I store files in multiple places because I figure any one of them could go down, and if I want them to be private, I encrypt them using the best encryption I can wrap them with.
Seth, do you believe it?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
The world could always use another file hosting service.
We're all on board with Mega. We'll try it out when we can. So let's move on to this next story. I like this story. It's called the Chippendale Building. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the Chippendale Building. Let me show you a picture of it. I've got it right here on my computer. That is the Chippendale Building, and they say because the top of the building, New York City, looks like a Chippendale chair. Now, this building was originally built by AT&T in the heyday of AT&T. They had a heyday and then they kind of fell off. And I guess they're sort of back in the second heyday now. And then it was bought by Sony. Sony has had it for, I guess, the last 15 years or so. Designed by Philip Johnson, Sony is now selling it. And they've actually sold it for about $1.1 billion. First of all, either of you been in the building before?
Walked by it.
Yeah.
Patrick, didn't you go to that building one time for like a Sony press event?
No, Sony's put me in a lot of strange places for press events, but never in a building they owned.
So the only time I was in that building, they had a press event for actually when they made hard drives. Up on the top floor is a sushi bar where they basically, they took this sushi bar from Japan, they took it apart, they put it in a boat, and they reassembled it up there. And there was this guy, it was the best sushi I've ever had. I'm kind of depressed this building has been sold. Well, Seth,
they're in it for the next 3 years, right?
Well, yeah,
they've leased it back, and so you can go back and get your sushi.
So we've got 3 years to go back and have sushi in the sushi bar. Give me some broader perspective on Sony, though. Is this the beginning of the end for them?
Well, I think the beginning of the end happened a while ago. I mean, they completely missed the mobile boat. I mean, they had the Xperia handset, but that didn't really set anybody on fire. They've had significant, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but they've had significant security problems, databases getting hacked repeatedly, and then it sort of became a game for a while to just hack Sony's databases, which was really sad. I mean, I felt for Sony because they just kept screwing it up. Yeah. And they were screwing up a lot of different things.
But Sony's been screwing it up for decades. I mean, this is the company.
I wouldn't say decades, but at least a decade.
At least a decade.
Yeah.
This is when when MP3 players are coming out. Yeah. Sony's music is warring with Sony Electronics, and you end up with these 8-track encoded players that don't really want to play with MP3s. Yeah. I mean, they've
remember minidisc. Minidisc would save us all.
Minidisc was huge in a lot of places other than the U.S.
Yeah. And it's not huge right now.
No.
I mean, when I was living in Japan, you couldn't trip without hitting a Sony product. In fact, you might be tripping over a Sony product. But the fact is that now, especially in the U.S., they are almost a non-player.
Yeah. So do you see a comeback for them at all?
They would have to have significant change in leadership, I think, especially at headquarters in Japan.
Patrick, should they divorce themselves from content? I mean,
oh my goodness.
One of the things I think that got them into trouble strategically was because they had this content part of the company, as you rightly pointed out, that was warring with the guys making the technology, and it I believe, led them not to create the best new gear and gadgets because of the pushback from the music and the movie industry.
Well, this is also a company where the Walkman, probably their most successful product in the second half of the 20th century, was basically because their CEO, their founder, I can't think of the name of the man, stumbled in between two research labs and was like, these things need to go together. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Peanut butter and chocolate.
Peanut butter and chocolate, and everybody's like, no, 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 and he was like, build it, and then boom, they sell, you know what I mean? They created an entire product market. And
It gets back to the product leadership that Seth was talking about. Yeah. So let's move on to our next story, which also is a story of product leadership, slightly different, but it's a story about Apple. arguably the company that has done the most to squish Sony into its current state. So Apple, as Read Write Web, Dan Lyons reporting right here, a lot of people are anxious awaiting Apple's earnings coming out this week. Now the stock has already declined from 700 to 500 since Steve Jobs unfortunately left the company. A lot of people, especially as Dan points out, saying, well, if they totally exceed their estimates for the fourth quarter, it's going to be great. The stock could be going the way up. If they just hit their estimates, it's probably going to be just going like this. And if they don't, it could be the end. Are you worried about Apple and their ability to innovate and be a big company, Patrick?
No. Apple's making money hand over fist. They own the tablet market. They have a huge percentage of sales in the phone market. Unlike Android, their developers actually seem to make money selling software on the iOS platform. And I think people who write about Wall Street need to create a trauma each and every day so that people panic and they go read their articles and they try to figure out if their stock's going to, oh my goodness, it's Wall Street. Wall Street doesn't know how to sell anything other than commissions on trades.
Well, yeah, but look, with Tim Cook in there, and as Dan points out in his article, he brought in a guy to run retail, then he tossed the guy out. The guy who wanted the job internally just left, and now they're running retail as their VP of finance. The whole Scott Forstall issue, which was the mutiny of other executives and Maps, and so it hasn't been the smoothest thing.
No, it hasn't been a smooth transition at all. But at the end of the day, would you rather buy Apple stock or Facebook stock? I mean,
there are other stocks on the market, by the way.
Apple may be slightly on descent, but going from 700 to 500. But as you said, they're still making money, hand over fist. They may, the iPhone may be decreasing in terms of market percentage, but in terms of sales, it's still the #1 sales leader for smartphones. People want that premium device the same way that they want that premium laptop.
One, there is no other Steve Jobs. Two, Tim Cook can't run the company as a despot, benevolent or otherwise. It's just not the way he works, as I understand. And three, you know what? Maybe the reality distortion field has been pulled away from Apple stock, and it's resolving at a more reasonable price. Because $700 a share was incredible.
Yes, I agree. 700 was incredible. 500 may be reasonable. But if you believe Henry Blodgett from Business Insider, which is another related story I've got here, he thinks, as he starts speculating about how low Apple could go, that maybe Apple is actually more like Yahoo than we might think. He sees a Yahoo-like decline coming for Apple stock.
What did Yahoo ever make? Yahoo doesn't make anything, and that's I think a real key issue here. Google is getting into hardware because they know that they have to have some kind of physical product. That's one of the reasons I think that they're doing Google Glass. The other is the technology aspect, but Android was a huge boon for Google because they finally got a physical product that people could get their hands on. And it happened to be, something that was amorphous. It started as phones, but now, we saw at CES, it was in an oven and refrigerators. And that's where Google is going with their product line. Apple still has a physical product that people love. These are sexy products. They're very hot. And Yahoo, doesn't make anything.
Yeah, so here's my take on Apple. They did a great job with MP3 players. The iPod was brilliant. They took over that market. Did a great job with phones. Took over that market. Now, Android has a bigger market share, but they've done a really good job with that. Go on to tablets. They've taken over tablets. Their tablets
they invented it.
They invented it, but they're dominant position there.
Absolutely.
But as low-cost providers come up, there are people building $20 tablets now that are actually decent. What's next, Patrick? Are they going to? Is it going to be the television? Is the next area that they take over?
I don't think they're. I wait with bated breath to see an Apple television, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. Could they release a less expensive phone? Yes, but I don't think. I think Apple's more likely to keep older models in the pipeline longer because the last thing they want to do is chase the rest of the market to the bottom. Apple doesn't want to go from premium product, huge margins, to let's see how much money we can lose on every single phone we ship. So I don't see any advantage to them chasing things down to the bottom.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it plays out. First, it starts with those earnings reports this week, so we'll see what happens. Let's move on to the next story. This one, I'm not sure whether to laugh or cry about this story.
Oh dear.
This is about a scientist in the UK that wants to breed Neanderthals. That's right. Using DNA splicing techniques, he wants to put Neanderthal DNA into stem cells. He's looking for a host, aka a woman, to give birth to a Neanderthal baby. Patrick, this seems like a bad movie. Is this possible?
All I'm trying to do is not make like football/soccer fan jokes right now. Find a Yahoo. You already have Neanderthals. Just go to the pub.
Or fag jokes.
Oh my goodness. I look at this and I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah. No. Seth, one of the reasons why this guy wants to breed Neanderthals is he claims that we might actually have something to learn from them. You buy it?
I think maybe medically we have something to learn about creating, a human or a Neanderthal from whole cloth and seeing if a woman can give birth to it and have it live. I think the medical science here is probably, I'll be generous and call it speculative, but we are seeing a lot of we're seeing stuff in medical science, biomedical engineering, biohacking, that was truly the stuff of science fiction even only 10 years ago. And now you're getting people who are, splicing open their fingertips and putting semiconductors, electromagnets in their fingertips so they can detect fields as they do their work. You're starting to see home hacking of bodies. So when medical science actually comes out with something legitimate and says, hey, we can clone a Neanderthal and have a woman give birth to it live, I wouldn't be surprised if that's possible, but that's, I would say, probably a decade out, not even to mention the ethical issues.
Aren't you supposed to start with mice or...
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this brings up the point.
A saber-toothed tiger, maybe.
Well, but could this be the Jurassic Park story here? Like, can we go and take your saber-toothed tiger and then get a little bit of, well, actually, it's more like birds. Get some birds, get some dinosaur DNA, splice them together, and we got a theme park. What do you think about that?
Breakfast eggs will taste much more interesting, I can say that.
Dinosaur eggs. So you're looking for a big breakfast.
I want an omelet.
You want? Patrick, has science run amok here?
Science is always running amok. That's the purpose of science. That's the glorious, awesome thing of science. Is you come up with an idea, you test it, it works or it doesn't work, you modify your idea, you move forward. So this guy just may be a little farther out on the bell curve than most of the rest of the people in his field.
All right, well, we'll be watching this story to see if we have Neanderthals coming soon to another episode of Downloaded. Let's move on to our next story, and this is about sort of the inverse of a Neanderthal. This story is about Sergey Brin on the subway, spotted, there he was, on the subway. As you see him right there, he kind of looks a little bit rough, but he's wearing Google glasses.
He's incognito.
He's certainly, I wouldn't sit next to him, by the way.
Somebody was like, he looks like an assassin, and I'm like, obviously you've never ridden
the New York subway.
Into Queens or Brooklyn or to Brighton Beach. You want to see people look like assassins? Right into Brighton Beach on a Friday night. Like,
so he was on the 3 line, I believe, so I think he was going from one end of Manhattan to another rather than going into Queens. I think it's great that he rides the subway. Is this one of those stories that we should not care about, or is it?
Bing, 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 bing,
what?
Bing. This is another story we should not care about. I mean, either that or like, who cares? He's wearing his glasses. You know what? He runs Google. He gets to have the shiny toys. He probably has a bat bike and a really, really cool paraglider and, robots.
There is an issue as to why he's not, using his jetpack to go from one end of Manhattan to the other instead of the subway. But
I think there's FAA regulations against using your jetpack in the confines of Manhattan.
Bloomberg said no.
I thought the interesting piece of this was the Google glasses, and he's out in public with them. Have you used the Google glasses, Seth?
I haven't, but I was actually thinking about what would be a legitimate reason for him to be using the glasses on the subway, because as we all know, the New York subway does not get a cell phone signal.
Au contraire, it does in some places, because Google's new headquarters at 14th and 10th, they've actually wired up the 8th Avenue line. Now, it's not the line that he was on, but they've wired up the 8th Avenue line, the ACE, where it goes through there. So that station has Wi-Fi, and there are a couple others that they put in place as well. I know they did this like 6 months ago. It may not be there anymore.
He could be trolling for paparazzi because he wants to keep the glasses in. He could be reading the New York Times. He could be watching a movie. He could.
I was thinking he was actually testing what it's like to use them in a situation where they're offline, where they're disconnected.
I love the idea of taking them and looking at your fellow passengers on the subway and being able to pull up their LinkedIn profile or their Facebook pages. So
I don't know
you
if
can
I
see.
want to see that stuff.
I do. I want to know what those guys have been doing.
Yeah, I can think of some Facebook profiles or MySpace profiles that would come up on buses and trains that I just don't want to know about.
So I played around with Google Glasses a little bit, and first of all, I found they gave me a headache. They put a little image up here that you can see, and you got to kind of look up to it. But the user interface just basically go like this along the side of the glasses. Now I've seen a lot of strange things in the subway. Someone starts going like this on their glasses, I'm moving further away, not getting closer.
What I want to know is who's going to be the first person to steal Google Glasses on the New York subway? Because at some point, some kids there going like, I can grab those. Yeah.
Look at this picture of Sergey of Brin again. Can we pull that picture up? I'm not stealing anything from that guy.
Seriously?
I'm staying far away from him.
They're going to be like, next stop, 11th Avenue.
Didn't that happen last year? There was some professor who's got some kind of web-enabled glasses bolted onto his head. He's got some vision issue, I think. I can't remember exactly. And he got into some kind of scuffle, and somebody tried to rip them off of his head, and it caused pretty severe damage.
I want to say he was doing a border crossing.
No, maybe it was a border crossing. It was something like that.
All right, so before we let this story go, I do think it's also interesting that maybe the fifth richest man in the world running around on the subway on his own. Didn't look like he had any, didn't have any bodyguards. Some guy just walked up to him and started talking to him.
His security is that good, Jim.
Maybe the Google Glasses have security built into them.
Oh my goodness.
No, I mean, look, good for him.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. Good for him. If you're not on the New York City subways,
he's just one of us.
As the fifth richest man in the world, if you're not in the New York City subways this week, where are you? Davos.
Oh dear.
So Davos going on right now. And I like this story. Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's a great columnist in the New York Times, that writes the Deal Book, was talking about the predictions that are made there. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
For those of us who are not familiar with Davos, what is Davos?
The World Economic Forum. It's where the rich and the powerful come together in a small town in Switzerland and basically talk about the state of the world and how to make it better, how they can all make money. I don't know. Did I describe that well, Seth? What do you think?
Hey man, I'm part of the 99%.
Yeah. So anyway, every year at Davos, people make predictions, and we listen to them because these guys, they're powerful, they're rich. He pulls together a couple of predictions, which I'll go through a couple of them for you. First of all, Bill Gates in 2003, talking about the Google guys, talking about Brin and et cetera, and said, let's see if they still want to run the business in 2 to 3 years. They like going to conferences now. Apparently they do, and they like riding the subway. 2004, Gates said spam will be resolved in 2 years. That came to pass. From Goldman, Abby Joseph Cohen in 2000 said the S&P will go up 10%. That was the beginning of the crash. 2008, Fred Bergstein from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. It is inconceivable that the world will go into recession. We all know what happened in 2008 and 2009. And last year, the guys from the Eurozone said basically, there's not a problem, everything's great, and the Euro is just fine.
Right.
Should we even pay attention to the things coming out of this place?
As I said earlier, this stuff doesn't involve Krugman or Stieglitz. I think they're all a little crazy.
Yeah. I think the real issue here is marketing versus prediction, Patrick. Yeah. So if you think about it, Gates, of course, is going to say spam's going away because he sells anti-spam products. Mm-hmm. How do you separate the signal from the noise there?
Well, you take a giant salt lick of salt, with pretty much everybody speaking at an event like this, because we'll never, sorry, I was thinking about the head of the World Macroeconomic Society, or whatever it was, where he was like, macroeconomics, the science that was instituted after the Great Depression, has eliminated recession and depression, and it's just like, so that worked out.
How's that working out for you?
The Euro guys pay no attention to the market crisis behind the curtain. It's just
you make predictions. Right?
Oh, sure.
How good are your predictions?
They suck.
Seth, how about you? Do you do one of those prediction columns every year? You say this is what's going to happen next year?
I wrote something about security trends, but that's because I actually pay attention to what's going on in that stuff, because somebody has to.
Unlike most people, you actually know what you're talking about when it comes to that?
Maybe. I wouldn't even go that far. But, these things, economic predictions, for one thing, I think are very
fraught,
sketchy.
Yeah. And
anybody who's going to make predictions ought to have a very good background, perhaps a Nobel Prize in economics. That's a good place to start, I think. If you don't have one of those, perhaps
I don't even think a Nobel Prize is going to get you very far.
Yeah,
I mean, economics is definitely not a perfect science. If you do want to know a little bit more about predictions and how to figure out what good ones are and what bad ones are, do check out this book. I talked about Signal and the Noise, and I did that on purpose. It actually is called The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. This is a guy who's managed to predict a number of things pretty well. It's a very good book. It's a little dense, a lot of mathematics in it, but I totally recommend it. Either of you guys read any of this?
I've read his columns. I haven't read his book yet.
Yeah, the book's good. His columns are great. I mean, the guy's spot on, especially if you want to win your fantasy baseball league. So that's it for this episode of Downloaded. I want to thank both Seth and Patrick for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
And thank you as well. And make sure you check us back here on the Tech Feed. We'll be bringing you all the top stories, and we'll be letting you know what to think of them. Until next time, you've been watching Downloaded.